Thank you, Senator Flexer, and Senator Sampson, Rep. Francesco, Rep. Osborne. There's a few number of you, so I'll call you each out by name. It's a pleasure to be here with the Government Administration and Elections Commission. I am here again to talk to you about a Siting Council reform bill. I represent Ellington, East Windsor, and Vernon, and you heard earlier from my first selectman that East Windsor is the town that sites more renewable energy siting through solar siting than any other town. I actually believe the statistic is in New England. And I have a lot of constituents in my district who are pretty frustrated, and we have been struggling through the solar siting process. We have a lot of challenges with the Siting Council, and so I'd like to speak today in support of House Bill 5551, and I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of sections that would make a particular difference in my district. First, right now in line 16, a current existing statute represents that members of the Siting Council include people with expertise in ecology. I want to point out that sometimes ecology sounds like a term that would be wide and overreaching, but in our experience, the Siting Council has a pretty myopic view on how to consider environmental impacts, and that is singularly focused on citing and approval of renewable energy to the exclusion of open space preservation, which also has a positive environmental impact. I want to talk about lines 43 through 45, which add local representation to the Siting Council in a way that's really different than bills that have been vetoed by the governor in the past. What we are hoping to accomplish in adding local perspective to the Siting Council is that it doesn't have to be someone who lives in the town where the solar is being sited. But what is happening when we see renewable energy sited that's gobbling up large amounts of available space is that it is eroding the local tax base in a way that's very significant. And it is also putting an undue burden on local emergency and first responders to respond to incidences. And in East Windsor, there have been multiple cases where our fire department has responded to an issue and had to plan for, if the fire expanded, watching it burn and containing the fire. And so I have constituents who are pretty frustrated with the myopic view of renewable energies as a single sort of green halo, that we think this is good for the environment and therefore anything we do related in the renewable space is good. We're not opposed to renewable energy. We just want responsible guardrails put in place. The Siting Council was originally developed to prevent a community from bearing a disproportionate burden of the state's renewable energy goals, or having all of the incineration facilities or all of the coal-fired gas plants in one area. And what has happened now is one town bears an undue burden of the solar responsibility in the year. In lines 88 through 94, we talk about improving access to the public. East Windsor is an agricultural community, and my constituents have very practical complaints about their ability to engage with the Connecticut Siting Council, and they have had significant issues where they haven't been able to log into meetings and participate, or they've logged in late and been excluded from future participation, and their voices are not being heard. I would be happy to answer any other questions about issues related to further sections that would make help in my community, and I want to just say that East Windsor, again, is not against solar siting. We site more than any other community, but we have very little local benefit, and we have a lot of local burden, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your testimony. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? I'm just going to ask you a few brief questions. So I had a proposal in my district for solar siting with the solar project with the Siting Council, and I was ready to pounce on them. I listened to the hearing. They did the hearing online, and the way that they cut people off, I was really disturbed by. And then I actually watched them, and I was surprised that when they were done with everyone who spoke for the first time, they then let people go back and talk more who had already spoken, who had used up all their time. So I was sort of surprised by that, and I'm surprised to hear you say that, you know, people have been unable to testify at all or speak at these meetings because they logged in late, when again, I was ready to pounce on them and say, how dare you, Siting Council? You should let people speak. You need to hear the impact on this project in this community, in this neighborhood. So do you think there's inconsistency in how the Siting Council operates, or did I just happen to catch them on a very good day?
I have not caught them on a good day yet.
Okay.
So what I'll tell you is, in my experience so far, I have had issues on every local issue where I have had constituents engage in the siting council. I have had a problem. We had an issue where our first selectman was supposed to get the ability to identify themselves as a party, make use of municipal representation fees paid for by the developer, and they were noticed at the wrong email address and were not able to engage. We have had issues where constituents would be emailing a siting council email address to participate in the meeting because they couldn't get the Zoom to work. And the way they have Zoom, they do not have in-person meetings. Everywhere else in state government, we have in-person options now. People can come in and testify. But if your neighbor is about to become a generation facility, you don't have an opportunity in your district to communicate with a person face to face. And I think that's an injustice to my constituents who mostly don't have the tech capacity to engage in this process the way I would like to see them able to engage. One of the situations, I had a senior citizen, it's an alphanumeric case-sensitive login to Zoom when you get a username and password. So I had a senior citizen saying, I am typing in these letters and numbers and I can't get into the Zoom. That is a huge problem. You shouldn't have to type in a case-sensitive alphanumeric login to participate in the public information forum. Another problem that I've had is that people who put in their commentary, because it's not testimony, you're not sworn and it's a quasi-judicial body that's hearing it, that commentary is not publicly indexed anywhere. So it's incredibly frustrating for constituents who believe that they have testified before a committee. They're hearing that what they said was presented to the voting members of the commission, but it is not indexed in the public-facing websites anywhere. And I think that that's probably a FOIA violation, but I think that's a very big problem with the public accessibility of these public hearings and proceedings. There's another component of this bill, the last section, that says once you have a certain amount of solar in your community, that you get some local control back. And we made the burden to reach that incredibly high. But we have other bills that have come before this General Assembly. We have problems all the time where people say, at some point you should get the local voice heard and considered. We are trying to engage in this process and not being heard in any way in East Windsor. And so the bar is high for that public engagement, but we're saying at a certain point, when you have done more than your fair share, that you should be able to participate in the process.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. In your experience in your district, when these projects are before the siting council, what has the process been for the site walks that the council does?
I honestly am not really familiar with how the site walks for the council have gone in the proceedings. I will tell you that after the fact, where projects are cited, our local fire and EMS are telling us that they're unsatisfied with the way that emergency responses are considered. And I will also say that the siting council came out to a cited facility after repeat complaints about a noise ordinance and was there to witness the cited facility that has like the wrong sized inverters, so they emit during sunlight hours a constant high-pitched screeching that the neighbors need to hear all the time. The siting council, there was representation from the siting council, there was representation for DEEP in front of this developer, and they promised us they would fix it, and it still hasn't been fixed. And the siting council basically cites and forgets these facilities. They put them in our communities. They're the only ones who have the ability to say thumbs up or thumbs down, and then when there's a problem, they're not really there to help us.
And so your experience has been that they don't even engage the first responders and the emergency services personnel in terms of their feedback of how these projects would impact how services are delivered or what kind of response is going to be necessary in the event of an emergency?
That is the way that I am perceiving it. We have a bill in public safety and in energy and technology this year to require emergency preparation with the first responders in the communities. Mind you, most of these solar facilities are being sited in our largely rural communities, and those exclusively have volunteer fire departments. And so there's a very high rate of turnover between our firefighters. There's not exceptional retention, and there's a small number of people responding to incidences from multiple communities when there's an issue. And so those folks need to be trained by the developer who's going to drain those local resources.
But that doesn't happen right now.
It's not currently the case, no.
And there's no requirement that there is.
There's no requirement. There are some operators who are offering that voluntarily during part of their process, but that is not the case for most of them, no.
And who are the stakeholders who are involved in the siting of these projects? Is it just one individual company, or?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. So there's a bunch of developers who are developing solar, and they're a wide range from like local small businesses in Connecticut who are engaging in small processes, and those are usually members of the community, and I find that they're usually good actors and good engagers in the process. And then there are huge TOs who also do generation, transmission organizations who also do generation, who are mostly based out of state, Florida, for example, who have generation facilities in the state, and then they're citing energy here, it's being sent to other places, and they're engaging, and they don't really have any skin in the local game on how that process moves forward and if they're a good actor. But stakeholder-wise, theoretically, you would imagine that there would be input from fire and EMS. You would imagine that the first selectman and local tax base would have consideration in the process. You would imagine that there's DEEP and the Department of Agriculture input. You would imagine that there's an ecology perspective in all of these proceedings. But in my experience, that does not appear to be the case. We have towns who have a very disproportionate burden to try and overcome local opposition and present that perspective at the siting council. So for example, I see over and over again my community in writ large opposing an additional solar facility being sited and being an inferior taxpayer compared to what could be there otherwise. And the local energy that they're generating isn't going for local use, and they're using a tremendous amount of capacity on the local grid. So then when a neighboring business or school wants to put in solar, there's no capacity left for them to put solar on their facility, which is unfair, and the siting council is supposed to protect against that disproportionate use. That perspective is never part of the deliberation in any way that appears meaningful. And that has been my frustration. There's no consideration of cumulative impact from what I can tell, even though they're supposed to be.
So that's really interesting, and I'm just going to ask you this one last question because we do have a lot of people still left to testify today. But so you're saying that when these facilities have been located in East Windsor, I don't know what the landscape is for your public school system in East Windsor, but I will say that, so in the town of Mansfield, and we're very proud that we had the first zero energy school built in the state of Connecticut, and there was a lot of effort and thought that went into that, into the Mansfield Elementary School. And are you saying to me that because of the level of solar projects that are already located in the town of East Windsor, if East Windsor wanted to smartly follow the lead of Mansfield and build a zero energy school, you wouldn't be able to, potentially, because you wouldn't be able to use solar the way that they do at the school in Mansfield?
Not potentially. If you go on to Eversource's grid capacity maps, which are available for the public, you can tell that in the towns that I represent, if anyone was looking to put in a greater than 2 megawatt facility to look at their energy generation, there would not be capacity. I had a very large dairy farm who wanted to put solar panels on the largest dairy farm in the state of Connecticut on all of their barns. They were not able to do it. There was not enough capacity in the grid for them to go to the full size amount. And that's where we want it. We want it on impervious surfaces. We do not want it on farmland. And that was a farmer doing they could have generated energy and continued to farm in that land. Not an option in that case. And there, again, there's a tremendous drain on the local tax dollars, and there is not the local benefit that I think people think, oh, there's solar, maybe we can microgrid. If we microgridded in East Windsor, we would generate 5 to 10 times as much energy as we needed. If I was able to take all of the energy East Windsor had and power all of the homes and all of the businesses in the 57th House District, I bet, I haven't calculated this, but if I was a betting person, I bet I could power my entire district off of the energy that I'm generating. I'm going to go check that math when I go home. I'll email you and let you know if I'm right.
That would be helpful. Who tells that farmer no?
So they have the process is they have to go and see if there's energy availability in the interconnection queue, and then they go through siting council. So they don't even apply if there's not capacity in the interconnection queue.
But who is the entity that declares that?
The interconnection capacity is the transmission organization. So Eversource and UI have the capacity standards, and they have maps that are on their website. That's
why there's so many people who are never in this committee in the room. Got it. Okay, great.
I think it might be other parts of this bill that they're here for.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and your testimony.